A soaked, barefoot boy sat alone beneath a flickering street lamp, reading quantum physics while the world rushed past him. Keanu Reeves hit the brakes. Something about the child felt impossible. Why would a homeless kid be studying the secrets of the universe in the rain? What Keanu did next would change both their lives forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain hadn't stopped all day. By nightfall, the streets of downtown Los Angeles were slick with runoff, reflecting neon signs in long, smeared ribbons of color. A bitter wind had rolled in off the coast, sweeping through alleys and under doorways, carrying a chill that clung to skin like regret. Traffic crawled through the storm. Horns echoed under overpasses. Most drivers just wanted to get home and shut the cold out. Keanu Reeves, however, wasn't in a rush. Not tonight. He had just finished a long, emotionally heavy shoot for a charity documentary about displaced youth. The interviews still echoed in his head. Stories of kids abandoned, overlooked, discarded by a society too busy to see them. Keanu had always felt a deep ache for people like that. Maybe because he'd once been lost himself. Maybe because no matter how successful he became, part of him never stopped searching for someone who needed help. His black SUV rolled to a stop at a red light on a side street near Pershing Square. It was late, almost midnight. The wipers moved rhythmically, squeaking faintly as they cleared the windshield. He glanced to the right, scanning the sidewalk out of habit more than interest. That's when he saw him. Beneath a flickering street lamp, a boy sat cross-legged on the wet concrete. His clothes clung to his thin frame. His hoodie was soaked through. One of his sneakers was untied. The other had no sole. His backpack looked like it had survived a war. But he wasn't begging. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't even watching the cars. He was reading. A thick hardcover book rested on his lap, open to a page dense with diagrams and equations. His small fingers turned the pages slowly, carefully, as if the paper might dissolve in the rain. His lips moved in silence, mouthing words only he could hear. He had a pencil broken, barely 2 inches long, and he was writing something in the margins. Keanu squinted. The title of the book caught the next flash of a passing headlight. Quantum Physics, the Mechanics of the Subatomic World. Keanu blinked, unsure if he was seeing right. A homeless boy no older than 12, sitting under a broken street lamp in a storm, devouring a college-level physics textbook. He didn't even notice the light turn green. Behind him, a car honked. Then another. But Keanu didn't move. His hand hovered over the gear shift, frozen. The boy looked so fragile in the rain, yet so focused. There was something in his posture determined, disciplined, almost hungry. But not for food, for understanding. Another car blared its horn, this time long and angry. Keanu snapped back to the present, pulled his SUV over to the curb, and turned on his hazard lights. He shut off the engine. Rain tapped steadily on the roof. He sat there for a moment, watching the boy. Not with pity, but with recognition. Keanu opened the door and stepped out into the rain. The cold hit him instantly, sliding down the back of his neck and soaking into the collar of his jacket. He didn't care. His eyes stayed fixed on the boy, who hadn't noticed him yet. The street lamp buzzed above them, casting a pale yellow halo that flickered every few seconds. The air smelled like wet pavement and diesel fumes, but beneath it all was something quieter, something sacred. As Keanu approached, he could see the boy's face more clearly. Pale skin, sharp cheekbones, eyes locked on the page in front of him. His lips moved again, murmuring something about electrons and probability. Raindrops rolled off the edge of the book's cover, soaking the pages, but the boy didn't stop reading. His world was on that page. Whatever he saw there, it mattered more than the storm. Keanu cleared his throat gently. The boy jerked his head up, startled. His hand shot out, clutching his backpack protectively. His body tensed, ready to run, but he didn't get up yet. He just stared at Keanu, wide-eyed, as if unsure whether to expect kindness or danger. Keanu held up his hand slowly. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm, gentle. I saw you reading." The boy didn't respond. His shoulders stayed tense, his breathing shallow. His eyes darted toward the book, then back to Keanu's face. "That's a tough book," Keanu added. "I barely got through it in college." The boy blinked. Then, cautiously, he spoke. "You've read this?" Keanu smiled. "Bits and pieces. It's dense stuff. Are you studying quantum physics?" The boy hesitated, then he nodded. "I found it behind the university, in a dumpster, but it's not garbage." "No," Keanu said softly. "No, it's not." Another silence settled between them, filled only by the hiss of tires on wet roads and the distant hum of traffic lights. Keanu crouched slightly, keeping his posture low and non-threatening. The boy's hands were trembling. His pencil had snapped in half at the middle. His knees were scraped, but his eyes were bright with thought, glowing with something too rare to ignore. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. The boy hesitated again. "Emil," he said finally. "Emil Santiago. That's a strong name." Emil shrugged. "It was my mom's idea. She liked names that sounded like you belonged somewhere." Keanu nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking in. Emil didn't say anything more, but he didn't run either. That meant something. "Do you mind if I sit for a moment?" Keanu asked. Emil eyed him carefully. Then, after a long pause, he scooted over slightly on the cold, wet concrete. There wasn't much space, but it was enough. Keanu sat beside him, rain soaking through the knees of his jeans. He didn't say anything else, neither did Emil. They just sat there in the flickering light, while the rest of Los Angeles moved on without them. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. Keanu sat quietly, watching Emil flip another soggy page with care. Every few lines, the boy underlined something or scribbled a note in the margin with the tiny stump of his pencil. His handwriting was small and uneven, but it was clear he understood what he was writing. Concepts like quantum entanglement and probability waves, things most people never even tried to grasp, were being processed by a child sitting barefoot in a puddle. Keanu finally broke the silence, his voice barely louder than the rain. "Why physics?" Emil didn't look up. "Because the universe doesn't lie. It doesn't care who you are or how much money you have. The rules are the rules. If you learn them, you can understand everything." Keanu stared at him. Emil continued, his voice a little stronger now. "My mom used to say that the universe is like a big machine. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't love you. But if you study the gears, you can find your place in it." Keanu swallowed hard. The way the boy spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't precocious. It was just raw truth, formed in pain and held together with intellect. "Where is your mom now?" Keanu asked gently. Emil paused. His fingers stopped moving. "She died," he said simply. "Last winter." Keanu didn't press. He didn't have to. "She gave me this book," Emil added after a moment. "She said if I got lost, I should keep reading, that it would help me find my way." Keanu glanced at the book again, now water-stained and curling at the edges. He recognized the edition. It wasn't just a textbook. It was a college-level foundational guide for theoretical physics majors, not something a child would understand, unless that child was something different. He looked at Emil's face again. His skin was pale, his cheeks gaunt, but his eyes were sharp, so alive it hurt. "You haven't eaten, have you?" Keanu asked. Emil shifted uncomfortably, as if the question were too personal. He shook his head. "When was the last time?" "Yesterday," he whispered. "Half a sandwich. Found it in a trash can behind a sandwich shop. They throw away a lot after lunch rush." Keanu stood up slowly and extended a hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you something warm to eat." Emil looked up at him like he was speaking another language. "I'm not trying to take you anywhere you don't want to go," Keanu added. "But it's cold. You're soaked. And I'd really like to hear more about your thoughts on wave-particle duality over something better than rainwater." Emil stared at the offered hand. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. Keanu helped him to his feet. The boy stumbled slightly. His legs were stiff from sitting so long on the cold ground, but he didn't let go of the book. He never let go of the book. As they walked toward the car, Keanu glanced down at him, and he knew this wasn't a rescue. This was a beginning. The interior of Keanu's SUV was warm and dry, but Emil didn't relax. He sat stiffly in the passenger seat, clutching his backpack to his chest as if it were armor. Water dripped from his sleeves and pooled on the floor mat beneath his feet. His shoulders were hunched. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to the dashboard, then down to the physics book in his lap. Keanu noticed it all, but said nothing yet. He didn't want to scare him off with too many questions too fast. They pulled into a nearby 24-hour diner on Melrose. The neon sign buzzed above them in red and white, the kind of place where you could find construction workers, students, and insomniacs all sharing booths after midnight. It was quiet tonight. The rain had chased most people indoors. A few customers glanced up when Keanu walked in, recognizing him, but no one said anything. The hood of his jacket was pulled low. Fame didn't follow him everywhere. The hostess gave them a corner booth. Emil hesitated before sitting down. His wet clothes made a soft squish against the vinyl seat. He looked down at the menu like it was a foreign document. "Order whatever you want," Keanu said gently. Emil glanced up, unsure if it was a trick. Even the milkshakes? Especially the milkshakes. Keanu smiled. A waitress arrived. Keanu ordered a black coffee. Emil ordered a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. When the waitress left, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. Keanu leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You said you found that book in a dumpster behind the university?" Emil nodded. 3 weeks ago, it was water damaged, but most of the pages were okay. I dried it out in the sun. Do you understand it? Emil gave a small, almost offended frown. Of course. Keanu raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Tell me about the double-slit experiment. The boy's eyes lit up. It proves that particles, like electrons or photons, behave like waves. When you shoot them one at a time through 2 slits, they still form an interference pattern on the screen behind it, unless someone's watching. Then they act like particles instead. And what does that mean to you? Keanu asked. Emil didn't hesitate. It means observation changes reality, that the act of measuring something alters the outcome. Like the universe is reacting to being seen. Keanu leaned back slowly, stunned by the clarity. That's not just memorizing definitions, he said. You really get it. Emil shrugged. My mom used to say that reality is a conversation. The universe speaks in math, and if you learn the language, you can hear it whisper. Keanu stared at him for a long moment, unsure whether to be heartbroken or amazed. The milkshake arrived first. Emil watched it being placed in front of him like it was a test he didn't trust. He looked to Keanu, who gave a nod. Emil picked it up and took a small sip, then another, then a third, longer one. A tiny sound escaped his throat, half gasp, half laugh. Cold and sweet. Keanu smiled and didn't say a word. You like science, Keanu said after a while. But why quantum mechanics? Emil wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve. Because it doesn't make sense. Not at first. It's weird. It's confusing. But the more you dig, the more beautiful it gets. It's like everything that looks random has a secret rhythm underneath. That's a poetic way to describe it, Keanu said. Emil's fingers tightened around the milkshake glass. It's the only thing I can control. I don't have money. I don't have a place to live. But when I'm solving an equation or trying to understand how particles behave, I don't feel like trash. I feel like I matter. The boy's voice broke slightly at the end. He looked down quickly, embarrassed. Keanu let the silence breathe. Sometimes the best thing to say was nothing. Can I ask you a question? Emil finally said. Of course. Why did you stop for me? Keanu thought for a long time. Then he answered quietly. I've seen a lot of people hurting. A lot of people ignored. But I've never seen someone that young reading quantum physics in the rain. You weren't just surviving. You were still trying to learn. That's not something I could just drive past. Emil nodded slowly, almost shyly. Do you have more books? Keanu asked. Emil unzipped his backpack. Inside were 3 paperbacks, each warped from moisture, and a stack of handwritten notes, carefully folded and organized in a rubber band. A faded spiral notebook. A torn packet of worksheets on advanced algebra. No clothes. No food. Just paper, ink, and ideas. "These are all I could carry," he said. "I had to leave the rest behind." "Where were you before this?" "A shelter. Before that, a foster home." "Did you run away?" Emil hesitated, then nodded. "The foster home said I was difficult. I asked too many questions. They said I thought I was better than everyone else just because I liked science. They locked away my books once, said I was being punished for showing off." Keanu's jaw tensed. He didn't speak, but something shifted in his eyes. "You're not difficult," he said. "You're extraordinary." Emil looked up, startled. "No one's ever said that to me. They should have." The waitress returned with their meals. Emil's eyes went wide at the sight of the steaming cheeseburger and fries. He reached for the burger slowly, almost reverently, like it might vanish. Emil took a bite, and for a few moments, everything else in the world disappeared. His eyes fluttered closed as he chewed, then he swallowed and immediately took another bite, followed by a handful of fries. He ate with a kind of desperation, but also with gratitude. Between bites, he paused long enough to glance at Keanu, as though checking to see if it was truly allowed. "You don't have to eat so fast," Keanu said softly. "There's more if you want it. No one's taking this away from you." Emil slowed down, though his hunger still drove him. "I'm sorry," he said through a mouthful, embarrassed. "Don't apologize," Keanu replied. "You're hungry. You're supposed to eat." For the first time, Emil gave a small smile. It was faint, but it lit his entire face. The boy who had seemed like a ghost under the street lamp now looked alive. Even if just for a moment, Keanu let him eat before speaking again. "Do you want to try something?" "What?" Emil asked cautiously. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes steady. "I'm going to ask you a physics question, a hard one. You can say pass if you don't know." Emil wiped his hands on a napkin and sat up straighter, almost like a student being tested in class. "Okay. What happens to time when you approach the speed of light?" Emil grinned. "Time dilation. Time slows down for the traveler compared to everyone else. If I flew to a star close to light speed, I'd come back younger than the people who stayed on Earth." Keanu raised his eyebrows. "That's right. And what would you need to reach light speed?" "Infinite energy," Emil replied instantly. "Which is impossible, at least with what we know now. But maybe." He trailed off, his eyes distant, as if already chasing the answer down invisible pathways. Keanu chuckled. "You think further than most scientists I've met," Emil shrugged. "It's fun. Physics is like puzzles nobody's solved yet." Keanu studied him in silence. The boy's hoodie was torn. His sneakers had holes that let water seep in. His hair stuck to his forehead in damp strands. By all appearances, he was just another homeless kid, forgotten by the world. But his mind was something else entirely. It wasn't just intelligence. It was hunger. The kind of hunger that didn't fade with food. Keanu set down his coffee cup. "Emil," he said carefully, "you shouldn't be out on the streets. You should be in a classroom, in a library, surrounded by people who see what you can do." Emil's smile faded. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Nobody wants me." Keanu's chest tightened. "I do," he said. "I want to hear more. I want to see how far your mind can go." "And I don't think I can do that while you're freezing in the rain. So how about this, finish your burger, and then let me take you somewhere warm." "Somewhere safe." Emil froze, his hands resting on the edge of the plate. He looked at Keanu as though trying to read his soul. "Why?" he asked. "Why me?" Keanu leaned forward again, his tone steady, unwavering. "Because brilliance should never be invisible. And tonight, I couldn't drive past you, not when I saw who you really are." Emil stared for a long time, then lowered his gaze. His voice was quiet, but it carried more hope than he intended to show. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll come." The diner was nearly empty, except for a trucker in the corner, nursing black coffee, and a pair of college kids bent over textbooks. The rain drummed steadily against the glass, muting the world outside. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of butter and fried onions. A jukebox hummed faintly in the background, playing an old song that no one seemed to notice. Emil sat across from Keanu in the booth, his small hands still wrapped around the edge of his plate, like it might be taken away at any second. The cheeseburger was half gone, the fries nearly demolished. He had slowed his pace since Keanu reminded him no one was rushing him, but the hunger in him was still obvious. Every bite looked like a victory, every swallow carried relief. Keanu sipped his coffee and watched, not intrusively, but with quiet care. He had seen people eat like this before, people who hadn't had the chance to sit down to a real meal in days. He knew better than to comment on it. What Emil needed most was the chance to finish without shame. The boy paused, taking a long sip of his milkshake before finally looking up. His lips glistened with chocolate, his eyes tired, but a little brighter than before. "My mom used to bring me to a place like this," he said softly. "On my birthday, we'd share fries and she'd let me order a shake, even if money was tight. She'd always say a milkshake was worth the splurge." Keanu nodded. "She sounds like she loved you very much." Emil smiled faintly, then his expression clouded. "She did, more than anyone." "What happened to her?" Keanu asked gently. Emil set his burger down and looked at his lap. His shoulders curved inward, his whole body shrinking. "Cancer. It got bad really fast. 1 month she was okay, and then she wasn't." His voice cracked. "I tried to take care of her. I read to her from her books when she couldn't get out of bed. But then the hospital took her, and she never came home." The trucker in the corner coughed. The college kids laughed quietly over something in their books, but in the booth, the air grew heavy. Keanu leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "I'm sorry, Emil. No one your age should have to go through that." Emil swallowed hard. "They put me in foster care after she died. But it wasn't the same. They didn't like that I read so much. They told me to play sports or watch television instead. One woman threw away my books, said I needed to stop acting like I was smarter than everyone else." Keanu clenched his jaw, but he kept his voice calm. "So you left?" Emil nodded. "I couldn't stay there. It felt wrong. My mom told me to keep learning no matter what. If I stayed, I'd lose that. So I ran away." Keanu's gaze softened, but he didn't argue. Emil hadn't chosen the easy path, but he had chosen the one that kept his mother's promise alive. Emil pushed the last bite of his burger around the plate before eating it. When he was finished, he leaned back slightly, one hand still resting protectively on his backpack. The way he kept it close told Keanu more than words could. Whatever was inside was all he had left of his world. "Is that where you keep your books?" Keanu asked, nodding toward the bag. Emil's fingers tightened on the strap. "Yeah, my books, my notes, and one more thing." "What's that?" Emil hesitated. His eyes flickered, unsure if he should trust him with the truth. Finally, he slowly unzipped the backpack and reached inside. His hand came out with a weathered envelope, the edges worn soft from being handled too many times. On the front, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Give this to the man who believes in you." Keanu stared at the words, a chill running down his spine. "Your mom wrote that?" Emil nodded. "The night before she went to the hospital, she said I'd know when to give it to the right person, but I didn't understand. I thought she meant a teacher, or maybe someone at the Protect library. But no one ever believed in me. Not really," his voice lowered, "until tonight." The boy placed the envelope on the table carefully, as though it were breakable. He didn't push it forward, but he didn't hide it either. It sat there between them, carrying more weight than its paper could hold. Keanu didn't reach for it. Not yet. He could see what it meant for Emil to even show it. Trust wasn't easy to give, especially when the world had already proven itself cruel. "You don't have to give it to me," Keanu said softly. "Not until you're ready." Emil looked at him, eyes glassy but steady. "I think she meant you." The waitress came by, refilled the coffee, and asked if they wanted dessert. Emil shook his head quickly, clutching his backpack again. Keanu just waved her off with a polite smile. When she left, he leaned closer. "Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman," he said. "She gave you more than most parents ever could." "She gave me books," Emil whispered. And rules. Not bad rules, good ones. She said no matter what, never stop asking questions. Never stop chasing answers. And never let anyone tell you curiosity is a flaw. That's not a flaw, Keanu said firmly. That's a gift. Emil nodded, but his expression darkened. Foster homes didn't see it that way. To them, I was just difficult. Keanu shook his head slowly. You weren't difficult. They just weren't ready for you. The boy stared down at the envelope again. His fingers brushed across his mother's handwriting. She said the man who believes in me would help me see what I'm meant to do. I don't even know what that is yet. Keanu felt the weight of the moment. He knew this wasn't just a lost child. This was a turning point. Emil slid the envelope back into his backpack, as if protecting it from the world once more. Keanu watched, sensing that whatever was inside wasn't just a message. It was a bridge between the boy and the mother he had lost too soon. The boy took another sip of his milkshake, slower this time, almost absent-minded. Do you ever wonder if the universe notices us? He asked suddenly. Keanu tilted his head. What do you mean? Like, we're so small, just specks. But sometimes it feels like things happen on purpose, like someone out there is arranging the pieces. My mom used to tell me the universe has a strange way of leading us where we're supposed to be. He glanced up, his gaze sharp. Maybe that's why you stopped tonight. Keanu held the boy's eyes. He didn't dismiss it, didn't call it coincidence. He only said, maybe she was right. For a long while, they sat in silence again. The plates were empty. The rain outside softened to a drizzle. Emil shifted in his seat, tugging his torn hoodie tighter around his thin shoulders. You don't have to go back to the street tonight, Keanu said gently. I can make sure you're safe, just for now. No pressure, no one's forcing you. Emil's expression flickered fear, longing, doubt, all colliding at once. Every time I trust someone, it goes bad, he admitted. They either want to change me or they want something from me. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady. I don't want to change you, and I don't want anything from you. I just don't want you to go hungry again. The boy studied him, his fingers tapping the table nervously. Finally, he whispered, I want to believe you. Then believe me, Keanu said. The check came, and Keanu paid without hesitation. Emil stuffed his notes and the worn envelope carefully back into his backpack, zipping it with slow precision. When he stood, his legs wobbled slightly, but he steadied himself. As they walked toward the door, Emil paused, staring back at the booth they had shared. He seemed reluctant to leave, as though the warmth and safety of the moment might vanish forever once he stepped outside. Keanu put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Come on, he said softly. This is only the beginning. Outside, the rain had dwindled to a light mist. Neon reflections rippled on the wet pavement. Emil hugged his backpack tight against his chest as they walked to the car. Keanu glanced down at him, struck again by the contradictions, the ragged shoes, the thin frame, and the brilliant mind burning beneath it all. The boy wasn't just surviving. He was waiting for someone to see him. And now, Keanu thought, that someone had arrived. Keanu's house was quiet when they arrived, the kind of quiet that feels protective rather than empty. Emil stepped inside cautiously, his eyes darting to the polished wooden floors, the bookshelves lined with novels and scripts, the photographs on the walls that spoke of another life. He lingered at the threshold, dripping water from his sleeves, as if afraid that walking further might break some invisible rule. You can come in, Keanu said with a gentle smile. This is a safe place. Emil nodded, but kept his backpack hugged tightly to his chest. He removed his shoes hesitantly, embarrassed by the holes in the soles. Keanu pretended not to notice and led him to the living room. The fire in the hearth had been left smoldering, and Keanu added a log until it flickered to life again. Emil sank into the couch cautiously, half expecting to be told not to touch anything. You must be tired, Keanu said. Emil shook his head. Not really. I don't sleep much anyway. Too many noises outside. Here it's quiet, Keanu replied. You'll get some rest tonight. Emil didn't answer. He sat stiffly, eyes moving from the flames to the books stacked on the side table. Finally, he spoke. Do you want to know who my mom was? Keanu sat across from him, nodding. I'd like that. She was Dr. Elena Santiago, Emil said, the words heavy with both pride and grief. She worked on engines, not just cars or planes. She built things for space. Keanu tilted his head, listening closely. She told me she used to be part of projects for the government, Emil continued. Classified stuff. She couldn't talk about most of it, but she would tell me stories in pieces. She said her work was about making travel faster, safer, and cheaper. She wanted people to reach the stars one day. Not just astronauts. Everyone. Keanu leaned forward, fascinated. She sounds brilliant. She was, Emil said softly. She taught me everything she could at home. Math, physics, chemistry, even philosophy. She said learning under any condition was the most important rule. Didn't matter if the lights were on or off, if we were hungry or full, if life was falling apart. Learning never stops. His voice wavered on the last words. He pressed his lips together tightly, as if afraid they might betray him with trembling. Keanu gave him time. The boy was revealing more than facts. He was peeling back the layers of the life he had guarded so fiercely. She made me promise, Emil whispered. Promise that no matter what happened, I'd keep reading, keep asking, keep solving. Even if the whole world forgot me, Keanu swallowed. She was right to make you promise that, and you've kept it. Emil looked up, his eyes bright with a mix of defiance and sorrow. It's all I have left of her. The flames crackled softly as Emil unzipped his backpack. He pulled out the worn envelope again, setting it gently on the coffee table between them. His hands lingered over it, as though letting go might make his mother vanish all over again. She gave this to me the night before she went to the hospital, Emil said. She told me I'd know when to open it or when to give it to someone who truly believed in me. I never showed it to anyone else. Not until tonight. Keanu's gaze lingered on the handwriting across the front, steady and neat despite the faint smudges. The words, "Give this to the man who believes in you," seemed to hum with meaning. He reached out slowly, careful not to rush the moment. Are you ready for me to open it? Keanu asked. Emil hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I think this is why she made me hold on to it. For tonight, for you. Keanu slid a finger under the flap and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several folded sheets of graph paper covered in lines, equations, and sketches. The ink was faded in places, but the precision of the handwriting was undeniable. Keanu unfolded the first page and studied it. Even without being an engineer, he could tell it wasn't ordinary. Complex diagrams of propulsion systems stretched across the page, annotated with mathematical formulas. Notes filled the margins in Elena's tidy script. It wasn't just a design, it looked like the blueprint of an idea meant to leap far ahead of what existed now. Keanu exhaled slowly. This is extraordinary. Emil leaned closer, his eyes locked on the pages. I don't understand all of it yet, but I know enough to see it's not like anything in the books I've read. She said one day this would matter. Keanu turned another page, revealing what looked like calculations for fuel efficiency and thrust ratios that pushed past the limits of current technology. He didn't know all the technical terms, but the ambition was clear. She was working on something the world wasn't ready for, Keanu said quietly. Emil nodded. She used to stay up all night sketching like this. I'd wake up to find her papers covering the kitchen table. She said the answers were always hiding in plain sight. You just had to look harder than everyone else. He swallowed hard. She told me if she didn't make it, I was supposed to carry her work forward, but I can't do it alone. I don't even know how to start. Keanu set the papers down carefully, as though they were sacred. He looked directly at Emil. You don't have to do it alone anymore. Your mother trusted you to protect this, and now you've trusted me. That means something, more than you realize. The boy's shoulders loosened slightly. As if for the first time, the weight he carried wasn't entirely his. Emil stared into the firelight, the glow flickering against his tired face. For a moment, he seemed older than 12, carrying years that no child should. His fingers brushed the edge of the papers as if touching them kept his mother close. She used to say discovery was dangerous, Emil whispered. That's why some of her work was secret. She didn't trust the people around her to use it the right way. But she still kept building, because she believed someone, someday, would use it for good. Keanu let the words settle before he spoke. And she believed that person could be you. Emil shook his head quickly, his hair falling into his eyes. I'm just a kid. I don't have a degree. I don't have a lab. I don't even have a home. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady and warm. You have her mind, her vision, and most of all, her courage. Do you think she wrote those words on the envelope by accident? She knew you would find someone to stand with you. And now you have. For the first time, Emil didn't look away. He studied Keanu, searching his face for any trace of doubt or pity. What he saw instead was belief, quiet, unwavering, and real. Do you really think I could finish her work? Emil asked, his voice trembling with both fear and hope. I don't think, Keanu said. I know. And when the time comes, you won't just be finishing it, you'll be expanding it. That's what brilliant minds do. They don't just follow, they lead. The boy's lips parted, as though the words were too heavy to hold inside. For a moment, he seemed to forget the hunger, the cold, the loneliness. All that remained was possibility. Emil tucked the papers carefully back into the envelope, then slid it into his backpack again. He hugged the bag to his chest, not out of fear this time, but out of devotion. She wanted me to keep learning under any condition, he murmured. Even this. And you did, Keanu said firmly. You honored her. You kept the promise. The fire snapped loudly, filling the silence that followed. Emil's eyes drooped, exhaustion finally overtaking him. His body sagged against the couch, the backpack still clutched tightly in his arms. Keanu watched as the boy drifted toward sleep. He could see the lines of strain on his young face, the battle between weariness and determination. He knew Emil had lived through nights far colder and lonelier than this, yet he had endured. That alone spoke louder than anything. As the flames dimmed, Keanu whispered into the quiet room, though Emil was already half asleep. You're safe now. Whatever your mother started, we'll protect it. Together. For the first time in months, Emil allowed himself to close his eyes fully. The envelope rested against his chest, glowing faintly in the firelight like a torch passed from one generation to the next. The night stretched deep into silence, the fire burning low, shadows dancing across the living room walls. Emil had fallen asleep on the couch, the envelope still clutched tightly against his chest. Keanu had meant to let him rest for a while before helping him to the guest room, but something in the boy's fragile posture kept him from moving him just yet. He sat nearby, watching the rise and fall of Emil's chest, listening to the uneven rhythm of his breathing. Then, it happened. Emil stirred, moaned faintly, and suddenly his body jerked. His small frame collapsed sideways, his arm hanging off the couch. Keanu jumped to his feet, heart pounding. Emil! The boy's face had gone pale, lips nearly colorless. His breathing was shallow, his body limp. Panic surged through Keanu like fire. He lifted Emil gently into his arms, calling his name again, but the boy didn't respond. Keanu grabbed his keys, clutching the unconscious boy close, and rushed to the car. The drive blurred. Red lights, empty streets, the screech of tires, none of it mattered. All that mattered was getting Emil help. At the emergency room, nurses rushed to meet them. Keanu shouted Emil's name as they placed the boy on a gurney, wheeling him quickly through double doors. A doctor snapped instructions, monitors beeped, and Keanu was left standing in the harsh fluorescent light, his chest heaving. A nurse guided him toward the waiting area. We'll take care of him. Please, sit. But Keanu couldn't sit. He paced, every second, dragging like an hour. His mind replayed Emil's fall again and again. The boy who had clung to his books in the rain, who spoke of particles and stars with such wonder, now lay fighting quietly for strength he didn't have. Finally, a doctor approached. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried weight. Are you family? She asked. Keanu hesitated only for a moment. Yes. The doctor nodded. He's stable for now. Severe malnutrition and exhaustion. His body has been running on empty for far too long. When children are starved for months, their systems become fragile. Even normal food can overwhelm them. His collapse tonight was his body's way of shutting down before things got worse. Keanu's throat tightened. Is he going to be okay? With careful treatment, yes, but it will take time. He'll need slow, monitored meals, vitamins, rest, counseling, and most importantly, stability. Children who've endured what he has don't just need food. They need safety, consistency, someone who won't disappear. Keanu closed his eyes. The words cut deep. Stability, safety, someone who wouldn't disappear. When he opened his eyes again, his decision was already made. "I'll be that person," he said firmly. The doctor studied him. "Are you prepared for what that means? He doesn't just need kindness. He needs a home, a guardian, someone committed long-term." Keanu didn't waver. "Then that's what I'll give him. He's not going back to the streets. Not ever again." The minutes crawled as Keanu sat at Emil's bedside once they finally allowed him in. The boy looked smaller against the crisp white sheets, an IV taped to his thin arm, monitors flickering steadily with every beat of his fragile heart. His backpack rested on the chair in the corner, a loyal companion even in crisis. Keanu pulled a chair closer, his hands clasped tightly together. He spoke softly, even though Emil was unconscious. "You held on this long, Emil. You fought when most kids would have broken. You don't have to fight alone anymore. I promise you that." A nurse entered with a chart, checking the IV. "His vitals are improving slowly," she said, "but it'll take time. He's been living in survival mode for too long." Keanu nodded, his jaw tight. What does he need most right now? Food, but carefully. Structure, patience, and someone who's there when he wakes up. Kids like him, they often expect people to leave. Keanu's chest tightened. "Then I won't." The nurse gave him a small smile before leaving, and the room grew quiet again. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Emil's face. The boy's lips twitched slightly in sleep, as if chasing after words or equations, even in his dreams. Hours passed. Keanu ignored his phone buzzing in his pocket, ignored the messages piling up from managers and colleagues. The outside world could wait. Emil could not. When dawn filtered through the hospital blinds, Emil stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes dulled with exhaustion, but still carrying that spark of stubborn life. He looked around, disoriented, then found Keanu. "You stayed," Emil whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm not going anywhere," Keanu said softly. Emil blinked, his throat working. "Did I mess everything up?" Keanu shook his head firmly. "Number, your body just told you it had enough, but you're safe now. The doctors are helping you heal." Tears welled in the boy's eyes, though he tried to blink them away. I thought you'd leave like everyone else." Keanu reached out, resting his hand lightly on Emil's shoulder. "Number, I told you last night, and I'll tell you again now. You're not alone anymore." For a long moment, Emil just stared at him, as if testing whether the words were real. Then he closed his eyes again, a faint breath of relief escaping his lips. Keanu sat with him through the morning, the decision that had been forming the night before crystallizing into certainty. Watching the boy fight for every ounce of strength, he knew this wasn't temporary. This wasn't charity. This was family. Later that day, the doctor returned, her tone steady but direct. "Mr. Reeves, Emil will recover, but you need to understand the bigger picture. His collapse wasn't an accident. Months of malnutrition have weakened his body. Without consistent care, it will happen again. He needs a permanent solution, not just short-term help." Keanu rose from his chair, his voice calm but resolute. "Then that's what he'll have. He won't go back to sleeping under bridges or skipping meals. I'll make sure of it." The doctor studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "If you mean that, the next step is legal guardianship. He can't be discharged back to the streets. Social services will ask questions. They'll want proof you can provide for him." Keanu didn't flinch. "Tell me what I need to do. I'll do it." When she left, Keanu sat again by Emil's side, watching the steady rhythm of his breathing. He thought of the promise Elena had made Emil keep, to learn under any condition. He thought of the envelope filled with schematics too advanced for most adults to grasp. And he thought of the boy himself, clinging fiercely to life, with nothing but a backpack and a mind that refused to stop reaching for the stars. Emil stirred again, his voice a whisper. "What did the doctor say?" "That you'll be fine," Keanu said, brushing the boy's hair back from his forehead. "But you'll need time, food, rest, care. Things I intend to give you." Emil blinked, his brow furrowed. "You don't have to. I'm used to taking care of myself." "I know you are," Keanu said gently. "But you don't have to anymore. I want to take care of you. Not for tonight, not for a week, but for as long as you'll let me." The boy stared at him, eyes wide. "You mean, like family?" Keanu nodded. "Exactly like family. I want to adopt you, Emil, to give you the home your mother wanted you to have. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I believe in you. Just like she did." The words hung in the room, heavy and fragile. Emil's lips trembled, as if he wanted to answer but didn't quite know how. Finally, a single tear slipped down his cheek, followed by another. "No one's ever said that to me before," he whispered. "Then let me be the first," Keanu replied. The monitors beeped steadily in the background, marking the rhythm of a boy's fragile body slowly growing stronger. Keanu held his gaze, steady and certain, anchoring Emil to a future he had never dared imagine. For the first time since losing his mother, Emil allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't lost after all. The hospital room had finally grown quiet. Emil slept soundly for the first time in days, his small frame wrapped in the safety of warmth and medical care. Keanu sat near the window, his thoughts steady, his resolve unshakable. That peace lasted until the door opened the following morning, and a woman stepped inside carrying a leather folder tucked beneath her arm. She was dressed in a gray blazer, her hair neatly pinned, her eyes sharp with the practiced focus of someone trained to look past appearances. She closed the door softly and looked at Keanu before glancing toward the boy asleep in the bed. "Mr. Reeves?" she asked, her voice even. "Yes," he answered, standing. "I'm Karen Morris, Department of Child and Family Services. I'm here because of Emil Santiago." She nodded toward the child. "We've been notified of his condition and circumstances. Before he can be released from the hospital, we need to discuss his placement." Keanu nodded, motioning for her to sit, though her posture suggested she preferred to stand. "I understand you've expressed interest in becoming his guardian," Karen said, opening her folder and reviewing notes. "I need to be very clear from the beginning. This process is not simple, and given your public profile, it's going to be more complicated than usual." Keanu's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "I don't care how complicated it gets. Emil isn't going back to the streets. He deserves a home, stability, and someone who won't walk away from him." Karen studied him carefully. "That's admirable. But let me be honest. Many children end up in situations where people mean well, but underestimate the commitment required. Emil isn't just any child. He's fragile, malnourished, traumatized. He's going to need patience, consistency, and professional support. This cannot be a charity project, or," she paused deliberately, "a publicity stunt." Keanu met her gaze without flinching. "I don't rescue people to be seen. I stand with them because it's the right thing to do. That's what this is about. Not cameras, not headlines. Just him." Karen tilted her head slightly, as if testing the weight of his words. "You understand that once this process begins, every part of your life will be examined. Background checks, home visits, psychological evaluations. Your work schedule will come under scrutiny. Everything." "I understand," Keanu said simply. She pressed further. "You're a celebrity. Your life is not private. Reporters, photographers, critics, they will all try to make a story out of this. Are you prepared for what that will do to him? He will be under a spotlight he didn't ask for." Keanu glanced at Emil sleeping peacefully, then back at her. His voice softened, but his conviction remained firm. "I know the weight of the spotlight. I've lived under it for decades, and that's why I can shield him from it. I don't want the world to see him as a headline. I want him to have the chance to grow without fear." Karen crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You speak with conviction, Mr. Reeves, but conviction doesn't erase procedure. We've had cases where celebrities or wealthy figures thought they could bypass the process. I need to make it clear you won't." "I don't expect to," Keanu replied. "I'll go through every step you ask of me." Her eyes flicked back to her notes. Emil has been through multiple foster homes since his mother passed. In each case, he struggled. He ran away, resisted authority, and refused to adjust. His records describe him as uncooperative, even defiant. If you're hoping for a simple adoption, you won't find it here. Keanu's voice grew steadier. He isn't defiant. He's brilliant. He's surviving in the only way he knows how. And if the system saw him as difficult, maybe it's because it didn't see him for who he really island. Karen lowered her folder, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've known him for less than a week. How can you be so sure you know him better than people who've been managing his case for months?" "Because I've listened to him," Keanu said. "Not just to his words, but to his silence, to the way he carries himself, to the way he clings to learning as though it's the last rope keeping him from drowning. I don't just know his file, Miss Morris. I know him." The social worker didn't respond right away. She studied him carefully, then finally sat down, crossing one leg over the other. "Say I believe you," she said slowly. "What happens when the press finds out? When cameras show up outside your home? When headlines scream about the homeless prodigy you've taken in? What will you do when the attention becomes unbearable for him?" Keanu exhaled, leaning forward slightly. "I'll protect him. I've spent years avoiding the spectacle of fame when I could. I don't need to parade him around. If people want to talk, let them. I'll be where I've always been, out of the spotlight, with the people who matter." Karen's gaze softened, if only slightly. "You know, most people would answer that by talking about how they'd hire security or issue statements. You're the first I've heard say you'd stay with him in the shadows. That's the only place he's ever felt safe," Keanu said quietly. "And maybe if he has someone to stand there with him, the shadows won't feel so lonely anymore." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint beeping of the monitor beside Emil's bed. Karen finally closed her folder. "All right, Mr. Reeves. I can't promise you anything yet, but I'll start the paperwork. It will be difficult. Every choice you've made will be under a microscope. But if you're serious, this is the road forward." "I am serious," Keanu said without hesitation. Karen stood, smoothing the edge of her blazer, her tone sharpening again. "Then be prepared. The courts will ask questions you won't expect. They'll ask about your career, your travel, your ability to provide day-to-day care. They'll even ask if Emil's best interest is to be raised by someone in the public eye at all. If you falter, he'll go back into the system." Keanu rose as well, his voice even but firm. "Then I won't falter. I don't want him as a project. I want him as my son. If that means every part of my life is put under a lens, then so be it." Karen studied him, her lips pressing into a thin line. She nodded once. "I'll schedule a home visit. Until then, Emil remains under state guardianship, though you can remain at his side here. Don't make promises you can't keep, Mr. Reeves. He's had too many already." Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "The only promise I'll make is one I intend to keep." She left the room, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. The moment the door shut, Keanu turned back to Emil. The boy was still asleep, unaware of the storm building around him. Keanu sat again by the bed, lowering his head into his hands. He had spent his life navigating film sets, directors, critics, and fame. None of that compared to this. This wasn't about scripts or applause. This was about a boy who had been left behind by every safety net meant to protect him. The legal hurdles loomed heavy, but Keanu's resolve only hardened. Emil deserved a life where his brilliance wasn't treated like a problem, where his hunger wasn't ignored, and where his grief wasn't punished. Hours later, Emil stirred awake, his voice faint. "Was someone here?" "Yes," Keanu said gently. "A social worker. She wants to make sure you'll be safe when you leave this place." Emil frowned. fear flickering in his eyes. "Safe with you?" Keanu leaned closer, brushing the boy's hair back. "Safe with me. I told her I want to adopt you. It won't be easy, but I'm not walking away." For a long moment, Emil just stared, the weight of the words sinking in. Then his lips quivered, and he whispered, "They'll try to stop it, won't they?" Keanu nodded slowly. "They'll try, but I don't back down when something matters. And you matter more than anything." Emil's eyes glistened with tears he tried to hide. He turned his face slightly toward the wall, clutching his blanket tighter. But his voice, though quiet, carried a fragile hope. "Then maybe this time, I won't lose everything." Keanu sat beside him until his breathing steadied again. Outside, the machinery of the system was already shifting into motion, ready to test every ounce of his resolve. But inside that small room, only one truth mattered. The fight for Emil's future had already begun, and Keanu had no intention of losing. The room was still when Emil stirred awake again, the quiet hum of hospital machines filling the silence. His eyes blinked open, glassy with exhaustion yet clear with urgency. He shifted slightly, his thin hands trembling as they searched for the worn envelope resting on the nightstand. "Keanu," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The letter. You have to read it, not just look at it. All of it." Keanu leaned forward, gently picking up the envelope. The edges were soft with wear, the handwriting across it steady and careful. He had only glimpsed its contents before, afraid to intrude on something so deeply personal. But Emil's gaze held no hesitation now. "My mom wanted you to read it," Emil said. His eyes welled, but he kept speaking. "She said the man who believes in me would know what to do. That's you. Please, read it." Keanu's hands trembled as he slid the letter from its envelope. The paper was slightly yellowed, but the handwriting was crisp and clear. He unfolded it slowly, his chest tightening with a weight he couldn't yet name. The first line was simple, but it pierced straight through him. "If you are reading this, it means my time is over, but my son's story has only begun." Keanu's throat tightened as he read on. Emil is not just a boy with curiosity. He carries within him the seeds of something greater, something that can move humanity forward if only someone will believe in him. I have seen how he learns, how he questions, how he solves puzzles far beyond his years. He carries my work in his heart and mind, even when the world tries to silence him. Keanu blinked hard, the words blurring. Emil lay still, eyes fixed on him, waiting. "I once worked in laboratories where propulsion was not just theory but possibility. I pushed boundaries others feared to cross, but I also knew I would not live long enough to see the breakthrough realized. My cancer made sure of that, so I left my work in Emil's hands, disguised as lessons, puzzles, and conversations at our kitchen table. He absorbed it all. He holds the key, though he does not yet know it." Keanu paused, exhaling slowly. His chest felt heavy, his eyes burning. "If you are the one reading this, then perhaps fate has placed him in your path for a reason. Do not let them dismiss him as a poor child with no future. Do not let the world's indifference bury his gift. He is capable of seeing what others cannot, of carrying forward an idea that could change the very way we reach the stars." Keanu's voice cracked as he whispered the words aloud. "Change the very way we reach the stars." He lowered the page for a moment, looking at Emil. The boy's expression was steady, though his lips trembled. "She really believed that. She told me I was part of something bigger, even when I didn't understand." Keanu nodded, his hand gripping the letter tighter. And she was right. Keanu steadied himself and lifted the paper again. The next lines carried an intensity that made his chest ache. "I fear what will happen to Emil if no one sees him. He will be labeled difficult, dismissed as a dreamer, shuffled through homes until his spirit breaks. That cannot be his fate. He is not fragile glass, he is fire. And fire, when protected, can light the world." Keanu pressed his lips together, reading slowly, absorbing every word. In the back of Emil's book, you will find notes. They are not mere scribbles. They are pieces of my life's work. propulsion systems that bend the limits of what we believe is possible. He does not yet grasp their full meaning, but he will. One day, with guidance, he will see them clearly, and when that day comes, humanity will take its next leap forward. The room seemed to narrow around Keanu as the weight of Elena's words sank in. She wasn't speaking of vague potential. She was speaking of destiny, of a responsibility she believed rested on her son's young shoulders. You may ask why I left this burden to him. The answer is simple. Because I trust him. I have seen in his eyes the hunger to learn, the courage to fail, the persistence to keep asking questions when others surrender to ignorance. That is the kind of spirit the world needs, not just in science, but in life. Keanu lowered the page again, his eyes wet. Emil was watching him with an expression caught between pride and sorrow. She always said that, Emil whispered. That I was fire. But when you're hungry, cold, and alone, it feels less like fire and more like ash. Keanu leaned forward, gripping the boy's hand. You're not ash. You're still burning. She knew it, and now I see it too. He turned back to the letter, forcing himself to continue. If you are reading this, you are the one I hoped for. The one who will believe in Emil when the world does not. My work will mean nothing if he is left alone. Protect him, challenge him, remind him that his mind is a gift, not a curse. And when the time comes, show him that love can carry him further than equations ever will. Keanu's vision blurred. He read the last lines twice, his voice cracking. I leave this letter with faith that whoever finds it will see Emil the way I do, not as a boy lost in hardship, but as a bridge to the future. Please, give him the chance. I cannot. With love and hope, Doctor. Elena Santiago. Keanu lowered the paper slowly, his hands trembling. He looked at Emil, his voice soft but filled with reverence. I see it. I see him, and I won't let her down. Emil swallowed hard, tears spilling onto his cheeks. For the first time since losing his mother, he felt the weight of her words carried not just by him, but by someone else strong enough to bear them. The room hung heavy with silence after Keanu finished the letter. He placed it carefully back on the nightstand, as though it were a sacred artifact, then turned his full attention to Emil. The boy's chest rose and fell in slow, uneven breaths, his thin fingers clutching the blanket like an anchor. Your mother's words, Keanu said softly. They're more than a letter. They're a map. She wasn't just asking me to believe in you, Emil. She was telling me that you're already carrying her legacy forward, that everything she dreamed of lives in you. Emil shook his head, tears spilling again. But what if I can't do it? What if I'm not as smart as she thought? I can't even keep myself from starving. How am I supposed to change the world? Keanu moved closer, his hand resting gently on Emil's shoulder. You don't have to carry it all at once. Great journeys don't start with the destination. They start with the first step. Your mother gave you knowledge. I'll give you stability. Together, we'll take those steps, no matter how long it takes. The boy's lips trembled, his eyes searching Keanu's face for any sign of doubt. But there was none, only a quiet strength, steady and unwavering. She believed in me more than anyone, Emil whispered. And now you do too? Keanu's voice caught, but he spoke with certainty. Yes, I see you. I see the fire she saw. I see the boy who reads physics in the rain when most would give up. And I see the man you will become one day. I believe in you, Emil. Completely. Emil's breath hitched, and he covered his face with both hands. For so long, the only voices around him had been filled with pity or judgment. To hear words of belief, true belief, was almost too much. His shoulders shook as he tried to stifle sobs. Keanu didn't move away. He sat beside him, patient, letting the boy's grief and hope spill out together. When Emil finally lowered his hands, his eyes were red but shining with something new, a fragile kind of trust. My mom used to tell me that when people really see you, it feels like coming home, Emil said quietly. Right now, I think I feel that. Keanu's chest tightened. He squeezed the boy's hand. Then let this be the beginning of home. The monitors beeped steadily, the night outside pressing against the hospital windows. For the first time in months, Emil didn't feel like a child drifting between shadows. He felt tethered by his mother's words, by the man beside him, and by the promise that he wasn't alone anymore. The letter had done more than reveal a hidden past. It had bound two lives together. Emil carried the spark of a future his mother had envisioned, and Keanu carried the resolve to protect it. Together, they would honor her faith. And in that quiet hospital room, with the letter resting like a torch passed from one hand to another, a fragile boy and a grieving actor both knew their lives had just changed forever. The letter had settled like a weight in Keanu's chest. He couldn't stop replaying Elena's words in his mind, her faith in Emil, and the urgency behind her prophecy. The equations she referenced still rested in the boy's battered physics book, carefully inked in Elena's sharp handwriting. Keanu knew he couldn't ignore them. They weren't just scribbles, they were her legacy. And maybe, just maybe, they were as groundbreaking as she had believed. Late the next evening, once Emil was sleeping peacefully under the quiet watch of the night nurse, Keanu slipped the notebook into his leather satchel. He drove through the dim streets of Los Angeles, his heart pounding, to the home of a trusted friend, Dr. Alan Mercer. Alan had been a physicist for decades, specializing in propulsion and energy systems. He had consulted for both NASA and private aerospace companies. More importantly, he was a man Keanu had known long before the fame, a man who valued truth above appearances. If anyone could tell him whether Elena's equations were genuine or fantasy, it was Alan. Alan opened the door in slippers and a sweater, raising an eyebrow at the sight of Keanu on his porch so late at night. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something close," Keanu said. He stepped inside, lowering his voice. "I need you to look at something. It's important." Alan led him into a cluttered study where chalkboards covered the walls, each one filled with scribbles of formulas and diagrams. Piles of journals and research papers lined the floor. The room smelled faintly of chalk dust and old books. Keanu placed the physics book carefully on the desk and slid it toward him. Alan adjusted his glasses and leaned over the pages. At first, he skimmed with polite curiosity, but then his eyes narrowed, his hand reaching for a pencil. He began to trace the equations, his lips moving as he calculated silently. The air in the room shifted, tension replacing casual curiosity. "Where did you get this?" Alan finally asked, his voice low and urgent. "It belonged to Emil's mother," Keanu said. "Her name was Dr. Elena Santiago. She worked in propulsion. She died last year. Left these notes for him." Alan's pencil tapped against the page. "Keanu, do you realize what this is?" "I was hoping you could tell me." Alan pushed his chair back and stood, running a hand through his gray hair. He paced across the room, muttering under his breath. "It's not just real. It's revolutionary. These equations describe a hybrid propulsion system that combines plasma acceleration with a regenerative fuel loop. I've seen theories like this, but never this complete. This could change everything we know about space travel." Keanu's stomach tightened. "So it's not just imagination, it's real science." Alan turned, his eyes blazing with excitement. "Real? It's beyond real. If this works, it would slash fuel requirements by half, maybe more. Spacecraft could travel farther, faster, with efficiency we only dreamed about. Do you understand what that means?" Keanu nodded slowly. "It means Elena wasn't just teaching Emil for fun. She was passing on the future." Alan dropped back into his chair, shaking his head in disbelief. "If this were published tomorrow, every aerospace program in the world would tear it apart to understand it. And whoever carried it forward, they'd go down in history." Keanu exhaled, his thoughts heavy. Emil's mother had seen her son not just as a boy, but as the vessel for something humanity had been reaching for centuries. And now, the burden of protecting that legacy sat squarely in Keanu's hands. Keanu leaned against the edge of the desk, his eyes fixed on the open book. "So what happens now? Do I tell Emil? Do I show this to the world?" Alan hesitated, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Not yet. This kind of discovery is like fire. Handled correctly, it warms civilizations. Mishandled, it burns them down. If the wrong people see this, they'll weaponize it before they ever think about Mars." Keanu felt the words settle deep. Elena had known this too. That's why she'd hidden the equations in a child's textbook. Why she'd left them with Emil only under the condition that the right person would guide him. Alan softened his tone. Protect the boy. He may not realize what he's carrying, but he's the bridge between his mother's unfinished work and what comes next. Let him grow before you drop this weight on his shoulders. Keanu nodded, his jaw tightening. I'll protect him. And when he's ready, I'll make sure the world sees him, not just the math, but the mind behind it. Alan closed the book carefully, as though it were fragile. Then you'd better prepare yourself. Once people know about this, neither of your lives will ever be the same. The drive back to the hospital felt longer than before. The Los Angeles streets stretched out, slick with dew under the orange glow of streetlights. Keanu's thoughts tangled as he replayed Alan's words. Revolutionary, dangerous, fire. He parked and walked the quiet hallways back to Emil's room. The boy was still asleep, curled on his side, his thin arm draped across the blanket. The sight of him, so small, yet carrying so much, struck Keanu harder than anything Alan had said. He sat in the chair by the bed, the notebook heavy in his hands. Emil stirred slightly, mumbling in his sleep, and Keanu whispered more to himself than to anyone else. You don't even know it yet. But your mother was right. You're going to change the world. The book rested on the nightstand once again, its pages holding the future. Keanu placed his hand gently on Emil's shoulder. Whatever battles came courts, skeptics, opportunists, he would face them. Not because it was easy, but because a boy and his mother's last wish had given him no choice. The secret was real. The breakthrough was real. And Keanu Reeves knew his resolve had to be just as real. The days following Alan Mercer's verdict felt heavier for Keanu. He carried the knowledge like a stone in his chest. Emil was healing, slowly regaining strength, and Keanu made every effort to bring normalcy into his life meals, quiet moments with books, even laughter. But the notebook with Elena's equations rested close by, its presence a reminder that danger often followed discovery. One evening, as the sky outside Keanu's home burned with streaks of gold, the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door cautiously to find a man in his late 50s standing there. His suit was crisp, but his expression was wearied, his eyes sharp and watchful. Mr. Reeves, the man said, my name is Victor Shaw. I was a colleague of Dr. Elena Santiago. Keanu froze. The name struck like a spark. He stepped aside slowly, allowing the man into the foyer. Emil was upstairs resting, unaware of the stranger's arrival. Victor's gaze swept the room, lingering on the quiet hum of life inside the house. He set down a leather briefcase and spoke in a low, deliberate tone. I don't have much time, and neither do you. Elena's work has surfaced again, hasn't it? Keanu narrowed his eyes. What do you know about her work? Victor exhaled, his shoulders heavy with years of secrets. I knew Elena when she was part of a classified propulsion project. She wasn't just brilliant, she was visionary. But she also believed in transparency, in sharing knowledge with the world. That belief made her enemies. There were people, powerful people, who wanted her research buried. Keanu's pulse quickened. She left something behind for Emil. Equations, schematics. And you're telling me there are people who'd rather it stay hidden? Victor nodded gravely. More than hidden, destroyed. If what she left is as complete as I think, then Emil is in danger. You both are. The words hit like ice. Keanu had always known the equations carried weight, but hearing the threat spoken aloud made the air feel sharper. Why come to me now? Because I respected her, Victor said firmly. She trusted me once, and though I failed to protect her from the pressure she faced, I won't stand by while her son becomes the next target. Keanu studied the man, sensing the urgency behind every word. What kind of danger are we talking about? Victor's expression hardened. Government contractors, private firms, men who measure progress in dollars and control. They don't want a propulsion system that can democratize space travel. To them, it's not a breakthrough, it's a threat to their power. If they find out Emil holds the key, they won't hesitate. A chill settled in Keanu's spine. His instincts screamed to shield Emil, to lock the doors and never let him out of sight. But another part of him, the part that recognized truth even when cloaked in menace, knew Victor wasn't exaggerating. Victor leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've got to decide quickly. Keep the boys safe. Keep the work safe. Because once they catch wind of this, there'll be no turning back." Keanu sat in silence after Victor's warning, his mind racing. The fireplace crackled quietly behind them, but the warmth did little to thaw the sudden chill settling in the room. Victor opened his briefcase and handed over a folder. "These are surveillance records. For years after Elena left the program, they kept tabs on her, where she moved, who she spoke to. She knew they were watching. That's why she went off the grid." Keanu flipped through the documents. Grainy photos of Elena in grocery store parking lots, timestamps on letters she sent, even redacted emails. It was unsettling. One page showed a fuzzy image of a younger Emil at a playground, alone. "She kept him hidden on purpose," Victor said. "She trained him not just in science, but in silence. Every move she made was calculated to protect him." Keanu looked up, gripping the folder tighter. Why didn't anyone stop this? Why didn't someone help her? Victor's jaw tensed. She had allies. Some tried. But the deeper you go into the world of experimental tech, the more you realize power doesn't like competition. And Elena's mind was competition. A long pause stretched between them. "Does anyone else know Emil is alive?" Keanu asked finally. Victor shook his head. "Not yet. But the moment those equations reach the wrong hands, they'll come looking. Fast. I suggest you move him somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Let things cool down." Keanu rose from the couch, pacing slowly, fists clenched. "I'm not hiding him. He's already spent his life in shadows. I won't teach him to fear the light." Victor stood too. "Then be ready to fight for that light. Because the moment you step into the open, the shadows fight back." Just then, footsteps creaked down the stairs. Emil stood in the hallway, pale and thin but alert. He had overheard enough. His eyes moved from Victor to Keanu. "Is it true?" Emil asked softly. "They watched my mom because of her work?" Keanu moved toward him and knelt down. "Yes, but she was brave. She did it all to protect you. And I promise, no one's going to hurt you now." Emil looked at Victor. "Do they want to take me away?" Victor didn't lie. "Some might, but there are others who will fight for your future. Your mother believed you could help the world. I believe that too." The boy stood a little taller. "Then I want to finish what she started." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll do it together. No more running. No more hiding." Victor gave a small nod of respect. "Then you'll need help. People who know how to work quietly. People you can trust." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "I don't have a list of spies on speed dial." "I'll give you some names," Victor said. "Start there. But be careful who you trust, even inside your own circles. Some are already watching." Victor handed Keanu a slip of paper. "One name, one number. Call this," he said, "and do it soon." The knock at Keanu's gate came just after noon. Emil was upstairs, sketching diagrams across a whiteboard, humming a tune his mother used to sing. Keanu, wiping his hands on a dish towel, opened the gate to find a woman in a burgundy suit standing stiffly on the steps. Her eyes scanned the property like a hawk sizing up prey. "Mr. Reeves," she said with a tight smile. "My name is Mrs. Eleanor Braddock. I was Emil Santiago's foster guardian before he ran off. I'm here for the boy." Keanu's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes narrowed. "You were the one he refused to live with," Keanu said slowly. "I was the one who provided shelter when the state couldn't," she corrected. "Until he ran away. He's been reported missing for months, and now I find him here in the home of a celebrity. I'm filing a formal petition for custody." Keanu didn't move from the doorway. "Is this about Emil?" he asked. "Or the headlines?" She sniffed, offended. "You think too highly of yourself." Emil came to the top of the stairs, barefoot and holding a pen, confused by the tension. Mrs. Braddock's tone shifted immediately. "Emil, darling, you remember me, don't you?" Emil stood frozen. The pen in his hand dropped. Then, softly, You made me eat in the garage." Keanu turned. "Mrs." Braddock's face reddened. He was disrespectful. He needed discipline. Keanu placed himself between them. "You're not coming in." She held up a manila envelope. "Court summons. You'll be hearing from my attorney." The summons came swiftly. By the following Monday, Keanu and Emil were seated in a modest family courtroom in downtown Los Angeles. Cameras had already begun circling the courthouse, curious about the unexpected custody drama involving a Hollywood icon. Keanu kept his head low and his arm gently behind Emil's back as they entered. Inside the courtroom, Mrs. Braddock sat confidently beside her attorney. She wore a sharp blazer and a pearl necklace that glinted beneath the fluorescent lights. Emil kept his eyes on the floor. His fingers twitched in his lap, tracing invisible shapes onto his jeans. Judge Peterson, a graying man with a calm voice and decades of experience, called the room to order. He asked both sides to state their intent. Mrs. Braddock's attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, my client was Emil Santiago's legal guardian before the boy fled. She has since filed a petition to regain custody and ensure he receives proper care, structure, and oversight. Mr. Reeves, while generous, has no legal standing. We believe his influence, though well-meaning, may not serve the child's best long-term interest." Keanu's lawyer, a quiet and measured woman named Susan Carville, rose next. "Your Honor, Mr. Reeves has been acting in Emil's best interest since the moment they met. This boy had been sleeping on the street, suffering the effects of long-term malnutrition and trauma. Mr. Reeves didn't exploit him. He saved him." Mrs. Braddock suddenly stood. "He's manipulating the boy. Just look at the press. This is a publicity stunt." Emil flinched. Judge Peterson raised his hand sharply. "You'll speak when I call on you, Mrs. Braddock." The court recessed for a short break. In the hallway, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Keanu ignored them, his focus solely on Emil, who leaned against a column, pale and silent. "I don't want to go with her," Emil whispered. "You won't," Keanu said gently, but his stomach churned. The legal system didn't always care about the heart. It cared about documentation, history, technicalities. Back inside, Judge Peterson asked Emil if he would like to speak. The boy stood slowly. His voice trembled. "She didn't care about me," Emil said. "She didn't ask why I was crying at night. She didn't ask why I couldn't sleep. I had to teach myself math because she never helped. She told me I was a burden." The courtroom went silent. Even Mrs. Braddock stiffened. "Mr. Reeves." Emil turned to him. "He listens. He sees me." Judge Peterson scribbled something slowly in his notepad. Then he looked up, frowning with concentration. "I'll need time to review everything." Later that week, the court ordered an emergency home visit. Mrs. Braddock had made new allegations that Emil was being used as a scientific puppet, referring vaguely to the propulsion equations. She even hinted that Keanu was exploiting the boy's genius for personal gain. The claim was absurd, but it forced an investigation. Social worker Karen Morris returned, this time with a notepad and a different tone. She spoke to Emil alone for nearly 40 minutes in the study. When she came out, her expression was unreadable. "I'll file my report with the court," she said. "But I will say this. Whatever arrangement you two have, it's not about fame. It's about trust." That weekend, a tabloid article surfaced with Mrs. Braddock on the front page. The headline read, "Hollywood's Lost Boy, ex-foster mom, speaks out." She detailed intimate, mostly fabricated accounts of Emil's time in her care, painting herself as a misunderstood maternal figure. Keanu read the article with clenched fists. Emil refused to even look at it, but the court took notice. Braddock's credibility eroded quickly under cross-examination when her financial motives came to light. Her literary agent had signed her to a book deal contingent on regaining custody or public visibility. In court the following Monday, her attorney tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. Judge Peterson leaned forward with a weighty sigh. "This case is about the child's well-being, not the public's entertainment. Mrs. Braddock, Your actions suggest a pattern of self-interest that undermines your credibility as a guardian. He turned to Keanu and Emil. I am not ruling on permanent custody today, but for the interim, Emil will remain in Mr. Reeves's care. A breath escaped Keanu's chest. Emil gripped his hand tightly, as if afraid the moment would vanish. Outside, reporters clamored again. Keanu said nothing. Emil kept his eyes on the sky. Back in the car, Emil finally spoke. She didn't want me. She wanted a spotlight. Keanu nodded. And the court saw that. You told your truth, and that mattered. Emil looked out the window thinking. I want to earn my future, he said. Not be fought over like I'm property. Keanu looked over. You already have, Emil. You already have. They drove home in silence. The kind that didn't feel empty but full of something steady. Something real. The fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle. Together. The courtroom was quiet except for the soft tapping of the judge's pen against his desk. Outside, protesters and photographers gathered, drawn by the headlines of a custody battle involving a Hollywood icon and a boy some had started calling the street genius. Inside, the stakes were personal, raw, and far from glamorous. Keanu sat straight, dressed simply in a dark blazer and black shirt. Emil sat beside him, clutching a worn notebook, the one his mother had given him before her death. Across the aisle sat Mrs. Braddock, dressed in a pastel pink suit with too much perfume and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something before flashing a confident glance toward the judge. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. Judge Peterson looked tired. This case had made national headlines, but he had no interest in fanfare. His eyes scanned the file before him, then he motioned to Braddock's attorney. You may proceed. Braddock's lawyer painted her as a caring woman who had stepped in when no one else would. He emphasized her past work with foster children, her devotion to Emil when he was abandoned, and her supposed heartbreak at losing him to the streets. He described Keanu's intervention as well-meaning but misguided, suggesting the actor was indulging in a savior complex and using the boy to polish his public image. Your Honor, my client is not against Mr. Reeves out of malice. She merely wants what's best for Emil. Fame is not a substitute for family. Then it was Keanu's turn. His lawyer stood and called him to the stand. Keanu took the oath and sat calmly, folding his hands. Mr. Reeves, why do you want custody of Emil? He didn't blink. Because he deserves a life where he's seen, not used. A life where he's safe to be who he island. Not a product, not a problem. A person. And are you aware of the challenges that come with parenting a child like Emil his and I? Trauma? His intellect? His past? I am, Keanu replied. And I'm not rescuing him. I'm walking beside him. That's the difference. His voice was steady, not dramatic, not grandstanding, just honest. The judge leaned forward slightly. What have you seen in Emil that moved you? Keanu looked toward the boy. A will to survive. A mind that sees the world differently. And a heart that's been just waiting for someone to believe in it. Emil looked down, his hands tightening around the notebook. Emil's name was called, and the room fell into a different kind of silence. He hesitated for a moment, then stood. His small frame looked almost swallowed by the witness stand chair, but his eyes were clear, focused. The judge offered a gentle nod, signaling that he didn't need to be afraid. Emil, can you tell the court what you want? The attorney asked, softly. Emil looked at Keanu, then at Mrs. Braddock. I want to stay with Mr. Reeves, he said. His voice didn't shake. Not because he's famous. I didn't even know who he was when I met him. I want to stay because he listens to me. He doesn't treat me like a problem or a paycheck. He sees me. There was a beat of stillness. Did you feel that way when you lived with Mrs. Braddock? Emil nodded slowly. She said I talked too much. She locked me in the basement sometimes when I had episodes. She said my mother was crazy and I'd end up like her. She told me no one would want me. Braddock shifted in her seat, visibly flustered. Her lawyer objected, but the judge allowed Emil to continue. She threw away my mom's letter, Emil added. I had to dig it out of the trash. That letter was the only thing I had left of her. The judge scribbled something. Did Mr. Reeves ever do anything like that to you? No, Emil said firmly. He bought me new notebooks, but he never touched my old one. He reads my mom's letter like it's, quote, sacred. And when I was sick, he stayed the whole night in the hospital. I woke up and he was still there. Braddock's lawyer stood and began to question Emil, trying to trip him up. You're a bright boy. Do you think maybe, Mr. Reeves has just been very kind because he knows the cameras are watching? No, Emil answered without missing a beat. He didn't tell the press anything. They found out. He didn't try to get famous. He tried to protect me. And how do you know that? Because, Emil said quietly, he was the first person who didn't want anything from me. A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge called a brief recess. As the bailiff led Emil back to his seat, Keanu reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. When court resumed, the judge addressed the courtroom. I've heard enough to make a preliminary ruling. He turned to Braddock's lawyer. Given the testimony, the documented history of mistreatment, and the questionable motives behind this custody filing, the judge paused for effect, then turned to Keanu. I'm granting Mr. Reeves temporary custody of Emil Novak, effective immediately. A final hearing will be set pending home evaluation and continued stability. Braddock gasped. Cameras outside erupted in flashes. Braddock stood frozen, her lips parted in disbelief. Her attorney whispered something, but her eyes remained locked on Keanu and Emil. The facade had cracked. The court had seen through her performance. Keanu turned to Emil and knelt beside him. You okay? He asked. Emil nodded, eyes shimmering. I'm not scared anymore. As they walked out of the courtroom, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing in a frenzy. Keanu didn't respond. He simply placed his hand gently on Emil's shoulder and guided him through the crowd. Back in the quiet of the car, Emil leaned against him. Do you think my mom would be proud? Keanu looked out the window, then back at him. I think she already islanded outside. The world kept buzzing. But inside that car, there was peace. For the first time in a long time, Emil wasn't a project or a burden. He was finally someone's priority. The lab smelled like solder, coffee, and ambition. Inside a secured wing at MIT, a group of engineers gathered around a digital whiteboard filled with equations so complex that even seasoned physicists paused to reread. In the center stood Emil, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, scribbling formulas like breathing. Keanu watched from a few feet away, arms crossed, quietly absorbing everything. He'd helped secure the space, the team, the funding, but none of this would have mattered without Emil's mind. One of the engineers, Dr. Maya Chen, adjusted her glasses and leaned closer to the board. Wait, go back to that spin stabilization sequence. Emil circled the section with a red marker. This part here. The resonant frequency issue with high-velocity plasma discharge? I think we're overcompensating for mass drift. Keanu blinked. Half the room looked like it had been slapped. The other half just smiled in disbelief. Maya whispered, he's right. The others crowded in. What if we inverse the drift factor to synchronize with the phase angle in real time? One of the grad students suggested. Use a dynamic coil matrix to stabilize the field, like a flux cradle. Another added. The brainstorm caught fire. Keanu leaned against the wall, overwhelmed and awed. He'd seen creativity before, on sets, in scripts, in music. But this was different. This was like watching the future form itself from the mind of a boy who, just weeks earlier, had been sleeping beneath a street lamp. By noon, the whiteboard looked like a war zone of symbols, arrows, and layers of recalculations. Emil hadn't taken a break. Keanu walked over and placed a sandwich on the table beside him. Time to refuel. Emil didn't even look up. In a second, I almost have it. Keanu smiled. That's what you said an hour ago. Emil turned slightly, then reached for the sandwich with one hand, while still holding the marker in the other. This is the key. Keanu, I think this might actually work. Later that afternoon, the group gathered around the simulation bay. A model of the propulsion unit scaled to about 1/10 real size sat humming with diagnostic monitors flickering beside it. They initiated the test. The plasma core stabilized in record time. Energy output exceeded predictions by 12%, and most importantly, the resonance issue Emil had solved, gone. Dr. Chen looked over her clipboard, then up at Keanu. "You have no idea what you've done bringing him here." Keanu didn't reply. He was too focused on Emil grinning, breathing hard, eyes lit with purpose. The breakthrough caught quiet attention from places Keanu hadn't expected. 2 days after the successful simulation, an unmarked government sedan pulled up outside the lab. Out stepped a man in a charcoal suit and aviator sunglasses, accompanied by a woman wearing a NASA pin. No press, no fanfare, just silence and urgency. They introduced themselves simply, Dr. Alice Monroe, Propulsion Division, and Agent Thomas Langley from a federal defense agency Keanu hadn't even heard of. "We've been watching the activity here through academic and satellite research networks," Monroe said calmly, "and the results you're producing are impossible." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe we just haven't been looking in the right places." Langley wasn't smiling. "We're not here to stop you. But what you're building this could shift the balance of everything. We're talking about propulsion systems that remove fuel as a limitation. That opens space beyond Mars, beyond Jupiter." Emil, sitting quietly nearby, said, "My mother used to say gravity is only an obstacle when you fear falling." Monroe turned toward him, surprised. "You're Elena's son." He nodded. "I didn't want to be a genius. I just wanted to understand her." That sentence hung in the air. Keanu placed a protective hand on Emil's shoulder. "This stays peaceful. No black sites, no disappearing geniuses. If you want to work with us, you do it in the open." Monroe nodded. "That's why we're here. You've already code-named the project?" Keanu nodded slowly. "We call it Nova's Key, after someone very special." Monroe blinked. "That name's showing up on multiple message boards. Some very smart people are watching. You'll need protection," Langley added. "And discretion. You might not like this, Mr. Reeves, but this is no longer just a science project. This is national interest." Keanu didn't flinch. "It was never just a science project. It's Emil's mother's legacy, and I promised her I'd protect it." After they left, the lab went quieter than usual. The team sensed the shift. What started as an idea, a miracle from a worn envelope and a boy's memory, had now become something far larger. Keanu walked into the corner break room, where Emil sat staring out the window. The boy looked different, older somehow. "Do you regret this?" Keanu asked. Emil shook his head. "Number, but I know now why she never showed this to the world. She was afraid." "Of what?" "Of people wanting to own it instead of share it." Keanu nodded. "Then we'll do it differently. We'll keep it grounded, centered in truth." Outside, the autumn leaves stirred gently as evening fell over MIT. In the glass reflection of the lab's curved walls, Keanu saw something he hadn't in a long time. Hope, but wrapped in risk. And he knew the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. That night, Keanu stayed behind in the lab. The lights dimmed, the hum of machinery steady and low. Emil had fallen asleep on a nearby couch, curled up with his sketchbook still in hand. Keanu walked over, gently lifted the pages. More than equations. There were drawings too. Diagrams of the propulsion model, yes, but also tiny imagined spacecraft. One had the name Nova etched on its side in careful handwriting. Keanu smiled. Then something caught his eye, a note scrawled in the margin. "Mom said the stars are just questions waiting for our answers." He closed the sketchbook carefully and looked at Emil, sleeping soundly. The boy was no longer just a survivor. He was a pioneer, carrying the dreams of a mother who saw further than her time allowed. Keanu whispered into the quiet, "We'll get there, Emil, no matter what it takes." The article hit the internet just after dawn. A glossy headline splashed across the front page of a popular entertainment blog. "Keanu Reeves adopts boy genius, the secret project behind closed doors." Within minutes, it was trending. By breakfast, it had gone global. Keanu saw it while sipping coffee in his kitchen, the quiet of the morning shattered by the sharp ping of a dozen incoming notifications. He closed his phone, exhaled, and turned to Emil, who sat at the table sketching a magnetic flow stabilizer. The boy didn't know yet. Keanu decided to let him have his morning in peace. But the peace didn't last. By noon, Paparazzi had found the edge of the MIT campus. They weren't allowed in, but their cameras could still see plenty through fences and parked vans. Keanu moved Emil into a more private space at the research facility, but it wasn't enough. Students whispered, staff stared. A few even asked for photos, claiming it was for their kids. Emil kept his head down at first, but the whispers turned louder. A Reddit thread popped up dissecting his sketches, claiming he was just a front, a prop in a celebrity's philanthropy cosplay. A popular science influencer tweeted that the propulsion theory was Hollywood fantasy with equations taped on. That night, Emil sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, staring at a comment section filled with strangers calling him a fraud. One comment read, "He's not a genius. He's a charity case with a good PR team." Another said, "Real scientists don't get adopted by actors." He didn't say much, just quietly closed his phone and climbed under the blanket. Keanu knocked gently, walked in, and sat down on the floor beside him. No camera, no press release. Just him and the boy. "I should have known this would happen," Emil said, voice barely audible. "It's not your fault," Keanu replied. "And it's not over." "They don't believe me," Emil whispered. "No one believes me." There was a long silence before Keanu spoke again. "Do you know what people said about me when I started out?" he asked. "They said I was too quiet, too awkward, that I wasn't real enough to be anything." Emil looked at him. "They don't get to define you," Keanu continued. "You are not what they say. You are what you do next." Emil didn't respond right away, but something in his chest loosened. Those words, "You are what you do next," echoed longer than anything the internet had thrown at him. He rolled them around in his mind, almost like a formula, searching for the truth behind them. He wanted to believe it, but the damage was already burrowing deeper than he expected. The next morning at the lab, Emil kept his hood up. He worked in silence, avoided eye contact, and flinched at every phone ring or burst of laughter. The once vibrant equations he scrawled across the whiteboard had vanished, replaced by half-finished symbols and smudged lines. Even Dr. Liam, the lead engineer from MIT, noticed. He approached Keanu privately and said, "He's retreating. We might lose him." Keanu didn't answer right away. He just stared at the boy through the glass, watching him erase more than he wrote. Later that day, he took Emil out of the lab and drove him to a place few people knew about, a small cabin hidden in the California hills, once owned by a retired astronomer who taught Keanu to love the stars. They hiked a quiet trail, the smell of pine thick in the air, until they reached a clearing with a telescope still mounted on a stone base. Keanu sat down and pointed to the horizon. "You know," he said, "when Galileo said the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, people wanted to put him in prison." Emil didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward the telescope. Keanu continued, "You can't expect people to understand what they've never seen before. Not right away, but that doesn't mean you stop showing them." Emil sat down next to him. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Everyone says I'm a genius, but I don't feel like one." Keanu nodded slowly. "Genius isn't loud. It doesn't always look like lightning. Sometimes it's quiet persistence. You stayed up 3 nights solving the polarity loop. You fixed a failure the entire MIT team missed. That's genius, even if they never clap for it." Emil's lips trembled. "But what if I mess it all up now? What if they're right?" Keanu turned to face him fully. "Then you start again, and if you fall again, I'll still be here, genius or not." For the first time in 2 days, Emil smiled, just a flicker, but it was enough. That night, they slept in the cabin with the stars above them and no cell service, no articles, no comments, just silence and sky. The next morning, Emil returned to the lab and erased the smeared equations. In their place, he wrote something new. The entire room stopped to watch. One of the engineers snapped a photo, not for Twitter, but to study the breakthrough. As the new formula stretched across the board, it was clear Emil wasn't broken. He was recalibrated. The media storm hadn't defined him. It had refined him. When asked later what changed, Emil simply said, "Someone reminded me I'm not what they say. I'm what I do next." Keanu stood behind him during that interview, arms folded, offering no applause, only quiet support. No headlines, no cameras, no fame could ever mean more than that moment of resilience. Back in the workshop, the propulsion prototype began humming with new life. Emil, once shaken, now moved with clarity. He didn't just build equations, he owned them. And though the world had tried to label him, box him, reduce him, he'd stepped out of the narrative. Not with defiance, but with direction. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder and said once more, "Let's keep going." And they did. The invitation came in a sleek envelope marked with the seal of the International Science and Engineering Forum. Emil stared at it in silence, the edges trembling in his fingers. It wasn't just any conference, it was the conference. Nobel winners, global innovators, and representatives from space agencies all gathered once a year to witness the future of science. And now, somehow, his name was on the list of presenters. Keanu had been sitting beside him at the kitchen counter, sipping tea. When Emil didn't open the envelope right away, Keanu reached over gently and said, "Whatever it says, I want you to know, it doesn't change who you are. You're already incredible." Emil tore it open. His eyes scanned the bolded sentence near the top. "You are invited to present your work on Nova's key to the International Assembly of Theoretical and Applied Physics. A date, a time, and a final note. Closing keynote slot reserved in your honor." The boy blinked hard. I can't do this." Keanu didn't flinch. "You've already done the hard part. This is just telling the story. But they'll all be watching, judging. I'll mess up. They'll think I'm just some weird kid with a lucky idea," Emil whispered. Keanu leaned forward. "No one lucky builds what you did. They'll be watching, yes, but not to judge, to understand, to learn. And if they don't, that's not on you, that's on them." Emil wanted to believe him, but the memories of internet ridicule, of classmates whispering and laughing behind his back, of headlines questioning his legitimacy, all of it resurfaced. The day of the flight, Emil nearly backed out. He stood at the gate in Boston, suitcase in hand, and stared out the window. "What if I freeze up there?" Keanu smiled. "Then we breathe, together." The conference hall was in Geneva, Switzerland, an architectural marvel of glass and steel overlooking the lake. Inside, banners draped with the logos of global institutions hung above the stage. The main auditorium could seat over 2,000 people, and it was sold out. Emil sat in the green room, his laptop open, his palms sweating. The slides were ready. The math checked out. The simulation of Nova's key rendered by the engineers played flawlessly. But none of that calmed him. A soft knock came at the door. It was Dr. Sophie Lin from MIT, one of the engineers who had helped build the prototype. "You don't have to prove anything," she said gently. "You just have to show them what's possible." Emil looked up. "What if they don't believe it?" She smiled. "That's the beauty of science. You don't need belief, just truth." He stood slowly, pulling the note from his pocket. Dr. Elena's letter. The very last words she'd written. "Let him speak for himself. His voice will carry further than mine ever could." He placed it gently in his jacket and followed Sophie out. As Emil stepped onto the stage, the world seemed to narrow to the sound of his own heartbeat. The vast auditorium lights dimmed slightly, leaving only a soft glow on the podium. Behind him, the first slide flickered to life, a swirling image of plasma flow fields generated by Nova's key. The audience waited. Not a cough, not a whisper. Emil gripped the sides of the podium. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then, he remembered what Keanu had told him on the plane. "You don't have to be perfect, just be present." He took a breath. "My name is Emil Cortez," he began, voice steadier than he expected. "I was raised in a dozen homes, lived in 100 rooms, and never expected to find myself here. But today, I want to show you something that started as a whisper in a forgotten journal, and now it's become something real." He tapped the clicker. Equations filled the screen, interspersed with visuals of the prototype. Emil walked them through the theory how the hybrid propulsion system used magnetic flux, compression to stabilize thrust across multiple axes. He showed how Nova's key operated in vacuum simulations, outperforming standard ion drives by nearly 140%. His voice grew stronger with every sentence. A murmuring of surprise spread across the front rows, scientists in their 70s whispering to one another, their pens scribbling fast. Emil continued, "What you're seeing is possible because I was given two things: a blueprint left behind by someone who believed, and a chance to build it by someone who didn't care where I came from, only what I could become." The final slide appeared. It was a simple image: Nova's key resting in its containment chamber, glowing faintly blue. The room went silent. Then, applause. It started with one person, then two, then the entire auditorium stood in unison. The ovation rolled like thunder through the chamber, echoing against the walls. Emil stood frozen, blinking back tears. For the first time, not because he felt alone, but because he didn't. Backstage, Keanu was waiting. Emil ran straight into his arms. "You didn't freeze," Keanu said, smiling. "I almost did," Emil whispered. "But then I remembered. I'm not alone." Outside the auditorium, a quiet buzz followed the two of them wherever they walked. NASA's head of propulsion, a woman named Dr. Kamala DeVries, found them near the refreshment tables. "We'd like to talk," she said, holding out a card. "About how far you want Nova's key to go." Emil looked up at Keanu, who only nodded. "This is your call." Emil took the card with a trembling hand. They weren't just asking about the engine. They were asking about his future. And for the first time, it felt like his to decide. Later that evening, as Emil walked the quiet hallway outside the lab, he stopped in front of a simple frame on the wall. Inside it, preserved behind glass, was the letter from Dr. Elena, the note that started it all. He reached out, gently touching the glass. "She believed in you before anyone else," Keanu said, joining him. Emil nodded. "And now I believe in me." Outside, the stars were visible, and somewhere among them, Nova's key would fly. The courthouse was quieter than usual that morning, the kind of stillness that felt sacred. No media, no fanfare, just Keanu and Emil sitting side by side on a wooden bench outside Courtroom 3B. Keanu wore a simple black suit, and Emil, for once, wasn't wearing his lab hoodie. He looked like a young man on the edge of something profound. A clerk opened the door. "Mr. Reeves, Emil, they're ready for you." They stood up together, Keanu gently placing a reassuring hand on Emil's shoulder. Emil swallowed hard, nerves fluttering in his chest, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both knew this was more than a legal step. It was a moment that defined everything that had grown between them: trust, love, and chosen family. Inside the courtroom, Judge Marlene Tisdale reviewed the documents in front of her with practiced calm. She had read the reports, seen the evidence of the trial against Mrs. Braddock, and received numerous letters from MIT scientists, doctors, and even a quiet endorsement from a NASA official. But today, she looked not at the files, but at the two people standing before her. "Mr. Reeves," she said, adjusting her glasses, "you've already proven in this court that your role in Emil's life has been one of care, guidance, and extraordinary protection. This hearing is not a trial, it is a confirmation. Are you prepared to assume legal guardianship and adopt Emil as your son?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "I am, Your Honor, with all my heart." Judge Tisdale turned to Emil. "And you, young man, are you choosing this man, Keanu Reeves, to be your legal parent and guardian?" Emil nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. He's already been that to me in every way that matters." A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Then it's my great privilege to declare the adoption finalized. From this moment forward, your legal name is Emil Santiago Reeves." The room went still, then flooded with a warmth that even the judge couldn't hold back. Keanu reached for Emil and pulled him into a quiet hug. It wasn't showy, it wasn't loud, but Emil clung to him like someone who had just been handed the safest place on earth. The judge cleared her throat, a little teary-eyed herself. "Congratulations to you both. This is an incredible bond, and I hope you cherish it forever." They would. And that day would mark the beginning of something even greater. Later that evening, the quiet celebration took place not in a restaurant or a public hall, but on the rooftop of Keanu's home. Emil stood near the edge, gazing up at the stars in a sky so clear it felt like a window to another world. The city lights below blinked dimly in comparison to the cosmic glitter above. It was exactly how Emil had imagined this moment might feel: peaceful, wide, and filled with infinite possibility. Keanu returned from inside, carrying a long rectangular box. He handed it to Emil without saying a word. Emil looked at him, then down at the box, and slowly peeled back the paper. Inside was a telescope, sleek, modern, and powerful, the kind used by amateur astronomers who dreamed of touching galaxies. Emil blinked. "This is the exact model I saw at the observatory in California when I was 10. "I know," Keanu said softly. "I asked the lab director what you were staring at the longest when you visited." She remembered. Emil's hands trembled as he ran his fingers along the smooth metal. It wasn't about the price. It was about the detail, the memory, the care someone had taken to remember something he'd never even said out loud. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Keanu placed a gentle hand on his back. "You don't owe me anything, Emil. You've given me more than I ever expected. You made me believe again in possibility, in change, in purpose." Emil looked through the telescope and adjusted the angle. "I think I see Jupiter." "Let's check," Keanu said, kneeling beside him. They shared the view in silence. A gas giant, a moon, the shimmer of space, small things that made the world feel beautifully vast. After a while, Emil leaned back, still looking through the lens. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was little, I used to imagine building a ship that could take someone as far as they wanted to go, not just into orbit, but somewhere infinite. Like if someone had a broken past, they could just leave it behind and find a new planet where everything felt fresh." Keanu glanced at him. "Sounds like a beautiful idea." Emil nodded. "I don't want to leave anymore, though." Keanu smiled, heart full. "But," Emil added, his voice just above a whisper, "someday, I'll take you there." The stars overhead didn't blink or fall. They just stayed steady, like a promise. Like a future not yet written, but already burning in the hearts of two people who had chosen each other against the odds. Tonight wasn't about finishing a journey. It was about beginning one with a new name, a new bond, and the shared dream of touching something greater than themselves. The next morning, a small brass plaque was quietly mounted on the wall of the MIT lab. It read, "Nova's Key, in honor of Emil Santiago Reeves. No cameras, no reporters, just a handful of engineers, and Keanu standing proudly behind the boy who once hid in the shadows of foster homes." Now, Emil stood taller not just as a genius, but as a son. As they walked out of the building hand in hand, Keanu glanced down. "Anything you want to do today?" Emil thought for a moment, then smiled. "Let's go get ice cream." And so, they did. No headlines, no press, no expectations. Just two people walking down a sunny street, laughing at silly flavors, and talking about the stars. For the first time in Emil's life, the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to build together, one incredible moment at a time. Some nights, long after the lab had emptied and the campus lights flickered low, Keanu would sit alone beneath the stars on the rooftop, hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The world was quieter then, slower. He liked it that way. It gave him time to think, time to reflect. He thought about how strange it all was, how a visit to a small memorial lecture honoring Dr. Elena had turned into something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. Back then, he had been chasing a memory, looking to honor a woman who once inspired him. But now, he knew that journey had never been about the past. It was about who he would become because of Emil. Emil Santiago Reeves. The name still brought a weight to his chest. Not a heavy one, something light, full of wonder and pride. That boy who once stared at the floor, afraid to speak, afraid to hope, now stood at the helm of something unimaginable. Keanu watched him grow, not just in intellect, but in spirit. He had been there through the sleepless nights, the silent tears after hateful headlines, the shaking hands before that first presentation. And now, Emil was leading a team of the brightest minds on Earth, with eyes fixed toward the stars. He was 16 years old, with a future brighter than the sky itself. They called the project Nova's Key, and no one outside the inner circle knew that the name came from a folded piece of paper, a letter written by a dying woman who believed in something more. That letter was still framed in the hallway, just outside the lab doors. Some passed it by without a glance, but Keanu always paused, because he knew it wasn't just paper, it was a promise kept. Keanu once thought his purpose was behind him, that his best roles were in the past, the applause fading with time. But Emil had taught him something else. He hadn't rescued a boy. That boy had rescued him, not just from loneliness, but from apathy, from standing still, from believing his legacy was already written. They weren't just building technology. They were building a future not powered by rockets or equations, but by trust, love, belief, by the simple, stubborn refusal to let a brilliant child fade into the background. The research center now had its own rhythm. Young engineers, coders, and scientists, many from broken systems just like Emil, worked shoulder to shoulder. What Keanu and Emil had built wasn't just a lab, it was a second chance factory. A haven for brilliance that had once gone unnoticed. And at the center of it all was Emil. His voice had grown stronger, his confidence steady. He didn't hide behind Keanu anymore. He stood beside him, equal in purpose, fierce in focus. And still, every now and then, he would glance over at Keanu with a quiet smile, as if to say, "I remember where I came from." The day Emil was asked to lead the next phase of Nova's Key, there were no cameras, no press conference, just a room full of colleagues nodding in respect, and a quiet handshake from Keanu that said more than any speech could. But that wasn't the end. One crisp evening, as dusk fell and the lights of the control room dimmed to a soft amber glow, a soft alert appeared on one of the monitors. A signal, unusual, faint, but undeniably intelligent. The team froze. Emil leaned forward, eyes scanning the data. No one spoke, not until the computer confirmed what they were all afraid to hope. The signal was not from Earth. No one said the word, but everyone felt it. Contact. Later that night, standing on the rooftop again, Keanu and Emil watched the sky. The stars were brighter than usual, or maybe they just seemed that way now. Keanu glanced sideways at the boy No, the young man who had once clung to him in fear outside a courtroom, and now stood poised to change humanity's place in the universe. "Do you think we're ready?" Keanu asked, voice low. Emil didn't answer right away. He looked up, heart racing, eyes calm. Then, he smiled. "Let's find out." It wasn't just the beginning of a scientific discovery. It was the beginning of something much deeper. A belief that when we truly see one another, when we lift each other without asking for anything in return, we create more than solutions. We create legacy. Keanu had once saved a boy's life, but the boy had saved his soul. Together, they opened the sky. Together, they answered the question every child has whispered in wonder beneath the stars. Are we alone? Now, for the first time, they had a reason to believe the answer might be no. And more importantly, they weren't afraid. Keanu stood beside Emil as the lab's main screen lit up with patterns from deep space. Around them, the room buzzed with quiet awe, but between the two of them, there was only silence, the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Years ago, they were strangers. One man searching for meaning beyond fame, one boy searching for safety. And now, they were family, bound not by blood, but by belief. This wasn't just about rockets or signals or the next frontier. It was about seeing value in someone the world had discarded, about taking a leap of faith, about love that builds bridges into the future. Keanu placed his hand gently on Emil's shoulder. "Whatever's out there," he said, "we'll face it together." Emil nodded. Then, almost in a whisper, "We always have." The screen flickered, the stars waited, and so did the world. If this story moved you, type "We'll face it together" in the comments. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. What kind of story would you like to see next with Keanu Reeves? Drop your idea below. And don't forget, sometimes the most incredible stories begin with a quiet act of kindness. We'll see you in the next incredible story.